Welcome. Today I am talking to Princeton's greatest living dissident, Sergiu Klainerman.
What an introduction.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the greatest living dissident in all of the Ivy League, actually. Who's better? Let's get going. So Sergiu, you caught my attention in 2020 when you wrote in Newsweek that for those like me who were educated in communist regimes, all this brings in painful memories of indoctrination and forced re-education, as well as their abject failure to produce anything but widespread hypocrisy and repressed conformity, end quote. So since you are a mathematician, you'll understand this. On a 0 to 1 scale, so we have the whole real numbers, all the real numbers in between, where 0 is full-fledged great terror Stalinism and 1 is full-fledged academic freedom. Where is Princeton today?
Right, very good question. One can start by looking at FIRE's ranking, this year's ranking on academic freedom, based on which University of Chicago comes number 1, with a qualification of this for the speech climate only as good. Princeton is praised 169, so that's below average. Harvard 170, Yale 198. With poor qualification as poor, I guess, yeah, below average. Princeton is below average. University of Pennsylvania comes up at 202. Yale, very poor. I think it's almost the last. Columbia is the last at 203. Anyway, I would rate Princeton below Harvard at around 5.
In the Ivy League.
And yeah, comparable to Yale. No, sorry, excuse me. I'll put Harvard at 5. I'll put Princeton at 4 together with Yale.
Where
University of Chicago at 8. And of course, with Princeton, I'll put it very low because of what happened with cuts.
Right. So wait. So now I'm confused. So like lower numbers are better or worse? Because you just put Chicago at 8 and Princeton at what, 5?
So 8 is better, right?
8 is better.
8 is better.
Okay, so
10 is maximum, 8 is reasonably good.
Okay, so my scale goes from 0 to 1, right? Where one is the best. So is Chicago at 0.8, or where would you put?
Yeah, okay. So divide by 10, everything by 10.
Okay.
0.4,
right.
0.8, and so on.
Right. Although FIRE does not actually rate the University of Moscow at 1935, so
so that's 0,
yes,
right?
Yes, that would be 0. So yeah, where like if we imagine this broader scale that includes things that fortunately we do not see in the United States, where would you say that the typical research university is on that 0 to 1 scale, where 0 is your University of Moscow 1937, say, and 1 is ideal, full freedom?
Yeah, presumably universities in the United States, when I came to United States, I would have rated them at 1. Now
for 1.000, right?
Yeah.
Mathematician will give that rating. I would think you could never actually get above.
Well, for me, it was ideal. I mean, you cannot imagine how. I'm sure that your wife felt the same way when she came.
Yes, my wife was only 6 when she got out. So
okay.
Her worst experience in school was being kicked out of a school event because she was wearing a Western dress.
Okay, there were things like this, right? But not academic freedom, I would say. There were all sorts of strange things. We also had problems like this with our children. But in terms of, anyway, at least it seemed to me, I mean, I was very idealistic. For me, it was a dream come true when I got to United States. Anyway, but now situation is much worse. So I think you're asking something.
0.5 or are we at 0.7, 0.3? Where are we?
You mean for Princeton now? 0.
So Princeton, you put at 0.4, where 0 is full-fledged Stalinism and 1 is the ideal world you arrived in.
Yes, correct. Chicago is still 0.8.
All right, so
that's pretty good. I mean, with Princeton in particular, I think what happened to Katz is unique. I don't think any other university was like it. By the way, there was another interesting comment that I want to make. So if you look at the FIRE ratings, And if you look at the first 30, the best 30s on their ranking, it's Columbia first. There is another private university, it's Claremont, I think it's number 3 or 4. But the first 30 are all public universities, which I find it interesting. It shows again that the more elite you get, the more woke you become. Anyway.
All right.
So you're asking me something. I think you asked me about University of Bucharest.
Yeah, that was my next question, right? So you attended the University of Bucharest from 1969 to 1974. So during your years of attendance, where on that same 0 to 1 scale would you put the University of Bucharest?
Yeah, so there was a period of time when it was a little bit better. Actually, that was probably the best time during communism. So I would have put the university at 0.3.
All right.
Then it got much worse.
Just a little worse than Princeton today.
Yeah, right. And then it became 0.2 or even 0.1 from 73 to 74. Wow. I left in 75. Yeah, so 73 to 75, you could say. I would have put it at 0.1.
So could you describe the violations of academic freedom you personally witnessed at the University of Bucharest?
Okay, so the point was very hard to violate something that did not exist at all. There was no real academic freedom.
Right, you said 0.3, so there's got to be.
Yeah, because I'm looking at other. Okay, so that's an interesting question. I'm looking at other factors. So, for example, organized censorship. Again, we have a scale from 0 to 1.
Yep.
So organized, and you start with 0 being, organized censorship, the maximum would be at 1. So it was very close to 1.
One is good. 1 is good. So close to 0.
Public self-censorship. I would put also at the same level.
Right. But what did you personally see, though? What did you actually experience?
Well, I mean, obviously there was a complete control of the bureaucracy, the party. We were constantly being told what to do, what to think. However, when it came to person self-censorship, then I would have put that at 0.5. So people can talk. I mean, there was this period of time where people actually, with my friends, I could talk all the time about all sorts of things. I would say people are much more worried in Princeton now than we were in Bucharest and the University of Bucharest in terms of person-to-person discussions. We're probably less worried that students are worried now to discuss their true feelings.
So you're more worried talking to other professors at Princeton today than you were at the University of Bucharest in the early 70s.
Not me, because I'm not that worried.
Other people.
Other people are.
I mean, what's the difference? In Bucharest, was it that almost everyone knew that you didn't believe this stuff? Or is it Princeton?
Yes, absolutely.
There's too many true believers at Princeton.
Yes, but of course there were the informers also. So there was a certain number of people who would be used as informers. So you had to know whom to avoid. You couldn't really talk to anybody.
Does Princeton have informants?
Good question. I don't know. I have no idea. They must. I mean, yeah.
I mean, my guess is there isn't anyone that is just paid purely to be an informant. It's just that when you have more true believers, then more people are likely to inform as a volunteer. But what do you think?
Yes, it's true.
Yes.
True, though I presume that this kind of people who do it are not just true believers, they are also opportunists. They get something, they feel they get something in return. Anyway, in Princeton, there is an increased control of the bureaucracy today. Organized censorship is relatively little, right? In other words, direct censorship. I'll put it at 0.1. But public self-censorship is quite high, so 0.6. And person-to-person self-censorship is also, in my opinion, quite high, higher than it was. I mean, or maybe no, I would put it at the same level as in Bucharest, 0.5.
Right. So with the person-to-person, then you really do have to ask yourself the question, what does this person actually think? It could be that they really believe it and they're telling you what they actually think. Or it could be that they just stay in character all the time, right?
Yeah, right. I'm not, as I said before, I usually am not worried about talking with people of what I believe, but other people tell me all the time that they are worried they're worried to participate. For example, sometimes we try to organize some letters to the president, and many people tell me that they prefer not to have their names on such letters. So I mean, that's pretty.
Even though they agree.
Even though they agree, obviously.
Right. And in a way, the main way that we figure out how much people feel censored is we compare what they say publicly to what they say privately. If they're privately self-censoring, then we really don't know what's going on, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And
unless you're very good at reading faces, and you say, you say that, but I can tell from your face that you don't believe it.
No, but that's why I'm saying that there is organized censorship and public self-censorship, if you want, and person-to-person self-censorship is, I don't know, 0.0, 0.5. So it's pretty bad, I think.
Right now, a common view is that communist regimes largely left STEM alone. Right? Lysenkoism aside, how did this fit your experience? Or was Lysenkoism even an issue when you were a student?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was past Lysenko, right? So,
there's no longer any Lysenkoism.
No.
So the biologists were normal again.
Yes.
Right. So then, did it fit your experience that the communist regimes left STEM alone?
Okay, so let me try to explain a little bit. So, mathematics and theoretical physics were mostly left alone. Apart from the fact that there was always skewed attributions, people prefer to find Romanian or Russian names to associate with whatever theorem discovery, and this was silly, but it didn't really affect the content. Applied sciences were heavily controlled, however, by the ideologies. The most important interventions in general was through hiring. So this was obviously affecting also math and physics. So in order to be hired, you had to be sort of a good standing member of the Communist Party as a person who follows, basically, who doesn't really show much initiative. And usually these people were also relatively, from the scientific point of view, would tend to be mediocre.
Yeah. So they didn't care once as long as you were in good standing with the Communist Party, you can say whatever you want in applied science. But if you're not in good standing, then it doesn't matter how good you are. Is that a good description?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for example, as you probably know, in Soviet Union, if you're Jewish, so this was not just a matter of social origin, or the fact that you're in the Communist Party or not. I mean, the Jews were kind of discriminated in a serious way. In particular, it was very, very difficult to get to be a student at University of Moscow or St. Petersburg. Not in Romania. Romania was less. In Romania was more sort of this kind of anti-Semitism was more at the higher level. For example, it would have been very difficult for me to become a professor at University of Bucharest because of being Jewish. I was also not a member of the Communist Party, and I would not have become anyway.
So you could be a graduate, you could be a student there. So you were a PhD student at the University of Bucharest, or what was your highest rank?
No. I was trying to become a PhD student. At that time, I had to be a member of the Communist Party. And
so you wouldn't join, and so they wouldn't let you in.
Yeah, they would not let me in as long as I didn't join. They would not let me in.
Did the party come to
you?
Fortunately,
I left relatively soon after my.
Did the party come to you and say, why don't you join? Come on, let's join.
No.
So
they would come to many of my friends who had, say, the same kind of level of academic performance, but not to me.
How would you compare Princeton's current treatment of STEM to what you witnessed in communist Romania?
Again, math and physics are doing reasonably well. I think engineering, it's starting to be more affected.
Mhm.
And of course, social sciences also, and obviously humanities are seriously affected.
Right. Right. So like you, my wife is a refugee from Communist Romania, or I'm not sure, would you have called yourself a refugee when you arrived?
Yeah, I was a refugee. Sorry, excuse me, just 1 second.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, there is somebody coming to me.
All right, I'll start over. So like you, my wife is a communist, excuse me, not a communist. Like you, my wife is a refugee from Communist Romania. But when asked about communism, most Romanians I've met give me a version of a noble idea in theory, but due to human hypocrisy, it worked poorly in practice. To what extent do you agree or disagree?
I think they are totally wrong.
Please tell us more.
Well, so I think it was communism was a terrible idea based on Marxist distorted economic theory. It's naive, secular, and kind of eschatological belief in the fact that at the end of the day we'll create a new man and everything will be perfect, everybody will be happy. The entire premise of communism was its absurd belief in the role of the proletariat as a vanguard of the revolution was incredibly artificial. And of course, it has led to many unmitigated disaster whenever it was applied. And of course, it was applied a lot in the last 100 years. So for me, communism was a fraud, both as a doctrine, as well as in the way it was implemented.
Wait, can we just back up for a second? So did you say the idea of the proletariat as a vanguard, or is it the idea of the Communist Party as the vanguard of the proletariat?
Okay, so you get me confused with the ideology. I don't remember. What I've learned is indeed that the Communist Party is a vanguard of the proletariat, and the proletariat is a vanguard of the society.
Right.
So they are the ones who have the historic responsibility to fight for the revolution and to implement the revolution and so on. So
yeah, this the party leads the workers leads the peasants lead everybody.
Exactly.
Whoever's left, the lumpen proletariat.
Right. Yes. And this reminds me of a quote of Orwell, who said that a society becomes totalitarian when its structures becomes flagrantly artificial.
Mm-hmm.
That is when its ruling class has lost its function but succeeds in clinging to power by force or fraud. That's exactly what happened. Well, maybe not so much at the beginning. I mean, the revolutionary period immediately after 1917 was slightly different, but certainly at the time when I knew communism, it certainly was like this. I mean, perfectly well described by Orwell.
So what was the bigger problem with communism? Sincere fanaticism or cynical opportunism?
It's very simple. Sincere fanaticism of few, cynical opportunism of many, and resignation and maybe normal opportunism for the majority.
So which was the bigger problem?
Of course, fanaticism of a few, because they were the ones. And well, actually, I mean, from at the time when I was grown up, it was even, I would say, the cynical opportunism was more important than a fanatical. But it was an elite, obviously, that was, half, maybe at the beginning they were fanatical, then they became very cynical. And
so I'm very pleased that you agree with me on this question, because most people don't, even people who know a lot about the history of communism. It seems that they focus more on the opportunism, and I'm always saying, well, what about the sincere fanatics? Without them, nothing happens in the first place. It's because of the fanatics the revolution even happens. Without them, you can't start mass murder with just opportunists. You need true believers, or things stay okay.
Yeah, there is a very, very good book by Yuri Sleskin from Berkeley, which is called The House of Government. I don't know if you know it.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it. It's
a wonderful book, and it describes exactly this aspect of the revolution. The original perpetrators, I mean, the original Bolsheviks were, of course, were fanatics, obviously. I mean, they definitely believed strongly in it, and it was like a religion for them. Yeah, so the House of Government is, the first 100 pages are really amazing, actually, in terms of describing the mentality, the ideology of these people.
So you put Stalin in the fanatic camp, not the opportunist camp?
Yeah, I would say he was probably both. from the
Right.
beginning,
But
but he was a fanatic for sure.
yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a recent book just about his library and his marginalia, which is very consistent with the fanatic story. But again, I've talked to many people who are highly informed and who just say, no, of course he didn't believe this stuff. But it's like, he didn't? It's hard to believe.
No, they all believed, of course. I mean, the original Bolsheviks, everybody around Lenin, obviously they believed the nonsense.
All right. So here's another quote from something you've written. Quote, overrepresentation of certain groups necessarily implies underrepresentation of others. This is certainly a problem, but not one of racism. Rather, it stems from the opposite of racism, namely a policy that rewards people based on their individual achievements and promise of future achievement, and not by the color of their skin or their ethnic or socioeconomic background, end quote. This suggests that academic achievement at places like Princeton is in steep decline. Is that what you think is happening now?
Well, so again, in math and physics, no, I don't see it. I mean, certainly I know math well. I don't see that.
You think math is still going strong and the system has not messed it up yet?
Yes, of course it could be. I mean, I think we are in danger. There are already signs which are bad. For example, we gave up. I think it was a big mistake. We gave up the GRE exam in math.
Really?
So there are a few signs, but overall, I think the quality is still very high.
I mean, the math GRE was always a strange test because if you can get a PhD in math at Princeton, you probably have a perfect score on that test.
Yes,
so it was always a bad top-coded test where it just didn't pick out the difference between the 95th percentile and the 99th percentile, right?
That's true, but
yes.
Nevertheless.
But it would be a lot better than nothing.
Yeah, no, and I do think for us, I don't think it was very important, but I think it gave a very bad signal to the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. I think I'm more worried about that aspect rather than for us. For us, it's not so important. I agree. I mean, letters of recommendations are much more important. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you know, when you get something like, I don't know, 900 applications, the GRE gives you a sort of a way to eliminate a lot of people who have a very low GRE. So it was also useful from that point of view. But
so, and like you also would know physics. You think physics is in decline yet, or it's still going at full capacity?
The physics department?
Yes.
I don't know. I have people who from the physics department who tell me that they're worried, much more worried than I am about the math department. So I don't know. I can't tell. But I think they have maybe more issues than we have.
All right. So Jews and Asians have a history of exceptional academic performance. What can less successful groups learn from Jews and Asians?
Well, I remember that when I was a student, in high school student, or even earlier actually, student at school, as you enter the school, you see a big placard with words by Lenin, and they were study, study, study. And I think
that's not wrong in everything. The sky is blue and study, study, study.
Right. So this was the one thing that the one quotation from Lenin that I think was not too bad. I mean, there was a lot of emphasis on studying. Of course, there was a lot of emphasis on studying. I mean, we know very well, right? Both the Jews and the Asians have enormous respect for education and studying, and they have, especially the Asians with the Asian moms, the fierce Asian moms. Obviously, these things make a huge difference. Of course, there could be other factors. I don't know, but I think these are the most visible factors. How much you praise education.
So probably the Jews are especially associated with contrarian thinking and iconoclasm and challenging ideas. Where would you put that as for, especially for making really great achievements and contributions?
I'll put it very, very high. Yeah, I put it very high. I mean, I think, I'm sure you know this very well. It's very important to be a contrarian. I mean, if you are in science, you basically, I think any great scientist has got this virus of sort of looking at exactly, sort of placing himself or herself outside the common view, right, and trying to trying to start from there. So trying to start from a minority point of view, I think it's an extremely important thing. So in that sense, you're right. I mean, I think the Jewish traditions were very helpful.
All right, excellent. All right, so colorblindness has practically been classified as hate speech on modern university campuses, but you, Sergiu, seem to find great value in this norm. If Princeton let you address incoming freshmen on the value of colorblindness, what would you say?
Oh, God. Well, okay, to start with, I will remind students about the goals of and the values of university education. I will rely on my own personal experiences growing up in Romania about the dangers of replacing or even just supplementing merit with other considerations based on what people in power may consider as worthy social justice goals. So the point is that somehow when you try to enhance the representation of some identity group of individuals deemed underrepresented, and maybe they are, of course, underrepresented, based on race, religion, sexual identity, or I don't know, physical handicap, or whatever else, by short-circuiting merit consideration, you create a zero-sum game inferno where you cannot possibly satisfy any group. The result is almost
zero-sum game inferno. I like that. It's a zero-sum game inferno, students.
The result is almost always a corrupt system in which people well placed or opportunists of all types can game the system to their advantage. So I think it's a terrible. I mean, anytime you get away from merit, you create huge problems, and you don't solve. In the end, you don't solve any problem at all, because you still most probably you still have huge differences between the outcomes of different groups.
So on that note, I'm actually curious about your last name. So would Romanians have thought of it as a German name, Klainerman?
Yes.
Could you have passed as a German if you had wanted to? You know, in the same way that right now in American universities, if you were 1/8 Black, you might want to say that I'm African-American, even though you don't care about that identity.
That's true. Yeah, I could, I guess. I don't know. Also, people tell me that I'm quite dark-skinned. So even though I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, maybe people claim that I'm more Sephardic. I look more like a Sephardic. So I don't know. I could use. I could even say that I'm a person of color.
Were there any Jews in Romania who tried to pass as not being Jewish, or tried to use mixed heritage or anything in order to get around?
Yes. Yes, there were quite a few. Yeah, definitely. I mean, at the beginning, there were quite a few that tried to completely forget. But then, of course, later on, it became an advantage, because the only way you can get out of the, I mean, very few people could get out of the country, and Jews were capable because of, you know, what Israel did. Israel was paying for people to get out. So it started to become an advantage later on.
Yeah, my mother-in-law was actually able to get out because she was half Armenian. Armenians were considered another counter-revolutionary group.
But who was paying for them? Who was paying for them?
Yeah, so I think they had some friends that were willing to go and help her out in Los Angeles, right? But so she was only able to get out alone. But it did seem like that Armenian heritage mattered somewhat. And then my wife's family was separated for 3 years as they tried to get the rest of the family out because no one else was Armenian.
Okay.
All right. So back in 2019, so before COVID, before George Floyd, how hard was Princeton math trying to increase ethnic and gender diversity?
Okay, well, I came into Princeton in 1987, and ever since I've witnessed a constant preoccupation to increase the number of female graduate students as well as the number of female faculty professors. The numbers
so mostly on gender, not on race.
That was mostly on gender. It still is mostly on gender.
Really?
This could change. I mean, it looks like it's going to change, but so far it has been mostly gender. The numbers have certainly increased, the number of female students, but the pressure obviously has not subsided, and I don't quite understand exactly where this is going. I mean, given the current trends, I don't see how this pressure can stop before we reach gender equality, which is, say, 50% male, 50% females, because as long as there is some discrepancy.
And you think the pressure is going to increase so that we also have full racial quotas or full racial balance too, or what will happen?
Yeah, right now it seems like we may be moving in that direction. I really can't quite tell. I think there must be.
They're not going to reduce Jews down to their percentage of the population.
Well,
there's not going to be affirmative action for Gentiles to get them up to their 98%.
Right. So but that's a problem, right? I mean, when you start talking about equity, when you put equity as the most important factor, then yeah, there are too many Jews, of course. I mean, I don't know, maybe 30% of the faculty is 25%, I would think will be of Jewish descent. So that's obviously high, much too high, right?
Yes. All right, so moving on. Blogger Scott Alexander has a joke, which is, I can tolerate anything except the outgroup. He has an essay of the same title that has this parable. The emperor summons before him Bodhidharma and asks, Master, I've been tolerant of innumerable gays, lesbians, bisexuals, asexuals, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, transgender people, and Jews. How many virtue points have I earned for my meritorious deeds? Bodhidharma answers, none at all. The emperor, somewhat puts out, demands to know why. Bodhidharma asks, well, what do you think of gay people? The emperor answers, what do you think I am, some kind of homophobic bigot? Of course I have nothing against gay people. And Bodhidharma answers, thus do you gain no merit by tolerating them. If Princeton really cared about diversity, shouldn't it replace current demographic preferences with strong affirmative action for moderates, conservatives, libertarians, and adherents of traditional religion? Or is this a bad idea too?
Well, it is really a wonderful story. Well, I don't know. To me, toleration of any group is fine as long as the organizing principle is to improve or at least maintain academic quality based on merit. So it's perfectly fine to have different points of view, but again, the organizing principle should be met.
So what if the admissions committee is so biased against them that you know that they are not meritocratic? Would it make sense to impose quotas on them to admit the people they do not like?
Okay, so here, let me put it this way. I strongly believe that having different points of view on contentious academic issues, that's important, ought to be an essential feature of a successful university. Both students and faculty would certainly benefit from serious debates, serious academic intellectual debates. So in that sense, I feel that if a particular specific point of view is missing from a particular academic program, that should typically is not mathematics, of course, the university should strive to find the most qualified person who represents it. So in that sense, I agree with you. I think
so and for student admissions as well.
No,
like you have to have at least 10% conservative students.
No, that I would not. Yeah, definitely. But for professors, yes. I mean, for faculty, yes. In the sense of bringing in faculty who represents a different point of view of high academic level or high intellectual level. If it's missing, you should do something about it. But when it comes to students, no, I wouldn't do anything. I mean, I would just look for merit, absolute merit.
All right. So you've heavily criticized Princeton's freshman orientation as nihilistic. What's wrong with it? And what, if anything, should replace this nihilistic freshman orientation?
Well, okay. So a freshman orientation program should, besides criticizing the thoughts of the past, as it happened at freshman orientations in Princeton, which were, it was a long story last year, in fact, at the beginning of last year, the freshman orientation was very problematic, as I wrote in a few of my articles. In any case, freshman orientation should criticize the thoughts of the past, but at the same time should take pride in the strong tradition of academic freedom, at Princeton in particular, and talk about the richness of present the richness of its intellectual life, the triumphs, as well as the flaws of the universities, both historically and present. It is a university, in fact, it's really the university's very traditional freedom and dedication to truth that has enabled the institution to improve itself over the years, building on its strengths and shedding a lot of its weaknesses.
While you're talking about problems of the past, how about a section on how bad Princeton has gotten in the last 10 years? Could there be a section on that?
Correct. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
We're really sorry for the last 10 years. Those are the worst.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But in any case, when I talk about nihilistic, I mean that in particular, when it comes to race relations, the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Princeton presented really a very nihilistic point of view of the enormous progress made at Princeton with respect to racial issues. I mean, obviously, university today is very different from the one 60, 70 years ago.
So is nihilistic really the right word, or would left-wing fanaticism be more descriptive?
I would say nihilistic in the sense that not caring about the values of the universities, not caring about the progress that was made, not caring about
right, but they care about something. You know, there's a famous line from The Big Lebowski where there's a character described as a nihilist. The guy says, "Nihilists," and there's I think what was the line was, there's like someone was called a Nazi, and then someone said no, he's a nihilist, and then the other character says, "Say what you want about the theory and practice of National Socialism, but at least it was an ethos." So, I mean, so like I would think of the woke movement as not being nihilistic at all. They've got a set of alternative values that they really believe in very sincerely. It's not that they want to destroy everything. They don't want to destroy their stuff. Or am I wrong?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, nihilism in some sense, it's a contradiction in term, because obviously even a nihilist believes in the fact that he's a nihilist, or I don't know, whatever, right? It doesn't make sense anyway. But I meant it, of course, in limited terms, as far as it concerns sort of the traditional values of the American society, right? Including fairness and considerations based on merit. So that's what I meant. But you're right. I mean, they also believe in something. Of course, they believe in something which I happen to believe that is very destructive.
Let's see. Sergio, your camera just moved a lot. Okay, yeah, now we're good again. Okay. Here's another long quote from you, Sergio. Guest blogging for Barry Weiss, you write, quote, "Communism had a strong sense of objective reality, anchored in the belief that humans are capable of discovering universal truths. It forcefully asserted, in fact, the absolute truth of dialectic materialism, as revealed by its founders Marx, Engels, and Lenin. Communist ideology held science and mathematics in the highest regard, even though it often distorted the former for doctrinal reasons." End quote. Early anti-Marxists often attack them for making blanket ad hominem arguments against, for example, bourgeois history and bourgeois economics, along the lines of, "Since you're bourgeois, of course you find these arguments compelling." How epistemically corrupt was classical Marxism-Leninism really?
Okay, so I only meant to say that Marxists had a strong belief in our ability as humans to find the truth. By no means do I think that Marxists themselves were in possession of such a truth. Right? So not only in economics, but especially in their understanding of the nature of man. They believe that class defined according to economic reality determines one's view of the world. They also believe that only the proletariat was naturally predisposed to know the truth, while bourgeois people could only arrive to it by re-education, which was usually pretty awful. This was complete lunacy as far as I'm concerned, and led in the end to an incompetent and deeply corrupt political elite. In that sense, they were obviously epistemically corrupt, both in their methods and in the use of these methods for their corrupt political ends. And obviously, with the goal of controlling the population.
Sometimes you'll hear conservatives say things like Marxism-Leninism was the fruit of the Enlightenment. And my reaction is always like, that's the exact opposite. What do you think?
It's true. Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of confusion about Marxism. Actually, when I came to the United States, I was ashamed. I visited both France, and I spent, of course, a lot of time in the United States, and I was amazed how intellectuals, my colleagues, students, and later faculty, how much they misunderstood the nature of communism. They knew a lot about fascism. So fascism was condemned from the beginning, but there was nothing even remotely similar concerning Marxism. There was absolutely no understanding of what it did and how it functioned and how terrible it was.
I mean, I would think that most American academics would also know very little really about fascism. I mean, for example, just to know Mussolini's origin story, to know that he was the head of the Italian Socialist Party before he became the head of the Fascist Party.
Yeah.
Right. He was the editor of the People of Italy. We have his daily editorials from when he was a Marxist-Leninist and when Lenin said he was a great guy. I mean, that's the kind of thing that hardly anyone knows about, really.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I meant to say, oops, I'm sorry. I think I meant to say more in the sense that whatever they knew, they were ready to condemn it. Right? They condemned it totally and completely and unconditionally. Well, that was not true about communism.
Right. Or I mean, just in terms of the economic policies of Nazism, fascism, I mean, the actual story was that these were very socialist economies, not full Stalinists, but they had a very large role for government. And yet most people barely think about that, or they just say, oh, even if you say, well, Nazism, that stands for National Socialism. So,
exactly.
That's like completely made up. They had no actual interest in socialism. And like, well, gee, I mean, like it's kind of odd that you would market yourself that way if it had no appeal at all.
Exactly. And of course, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at communism started as a socialist movement with internationalist objectives, let's say, right? While, of course, the Nazi Party, National Socialist Party, was also a socialist party, but was nationalist. But in the end, if you look at what happened with the communist parties in just about all countries that I know of, they became very nationalistic at the end.
So Romania, especially, right?
They became like they were almost indistinguishable from Nazi parties. I mean, maybe the only difference was that they were not obsessed by Jews, but otherwise they had all the characteristics of the Nazi.
So would you say that it is unfair to call wokeism cultural Marxism? Or are the underlying similarities bigger than the differences?
Okay, so sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yes, sure. Would you say that it is unfair to call wokeism cultural Marxism? Or are the underlying similarities bigger than the differences?
Well, I think there are many more things that get into what is called the woke movement. So some of it is cultural Marxism, of course, coming from Gramsci and the Frankfurt School, but there is also other things that go in, like the postmodernism ideas, right, and deconstructionism, but then also there is the willingness of the Democratic Party, I think, to use identity politics has played a major role in the creation of wokeism. There is
which you might say an important part of actual Marxist-Leninist countries was crushing identity politics.
Yes,
sure. Yes, we're all Soviet citizens here. We're not going to be having some separate Armenian.
Yes, at least at the beginning. At the beginning. Then later on, it became more Russian nationalist or Romanian. I mean, anti-Hungarian.
Right.
And sort of not very happy with Jews and so on.
Right. Although if you think about identity politics as supporting minority identities, there's the identity politics of the of the main identity where everyone has to be part of that. And then there is the identity politics where you try to say, let's let every individual identity get its own quota. So there's not much of that. Like really after probably, maybe.
You mean in communism?
In communist countries. So.
In communism, indeed, as you said, that they were trying to crush these.
Yes, I mean, you're right. Under Lenin and very early Stalin, because he was Minister of Nationalities or whatever his job title was, there was a pretense of we're going to let each country be Stalinist in its own way, in its own language, right?
Yes,
but then, but over time, then yes, the Russian nationalism takes over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in Romania, the same thing. I mean, originally, I mean, the ideology was completely internationalist. We don't care about your religion or ethnic identities. And
which is why Gorbachev was so shocked by the ethnic breakdown of the Soviet Union.
Yes,
the idea of even telling people for 70 years they're all Soviets, and that still it turns out that you can get Azerbaijanis killing Armenians and vice versa in the late 80s. And it's like, well, wait a second. Like, we never told you this.
Right, or Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
The Czech Republic. I mean, that's one of the sort of the remarkable things that happened with the collapse of communism, that all these things that were supposed to have been solved by the communist regime, all these issues between, for example, ethnic minorities, they all explode. I mean, it's like, the communism has not been able to do anything about them. They just kept them under, they just kept them suppressed. And, once the lead was out, everything exploded back to what it was before.
I mean, Yugoslavia is especially striking. Actually, once I was at the University Library at George Mason, and I found the English language publication of the Yugoslavian Communist Party. Right, so I pick it off the shelf, and I just flipped to the last issue before the journal went out of business, because the Yugoslavian Communist Party went out of business. And,
yes.
and I'm reading this thing. It's all in English, so I have no trouble reading it. And the last issue is saying, and so there's the iron unity of Serbs, Croats, Slovene, Macedonians, and then next issue it disappears, and there's a civil war. And it was a truly Orwellian moment where, like, up to the very last issue, there was no even mention that there was any possibility that anyone disagreed with this stuff. And it turns out almost everyone disagreed with it.
But this was this air of artificial. I mean, the system was so artificial, and it's
and the fear,
there,
like
there was this huge...
the iron fist. People are shutting up, but not out of sincere conviction.
Right. So, like I've said it often, is the feeling that I had as growing up in Romania was one of sort of schizophrenic, almost schizophrenic. There were two realities. There was the official reality, which was, all is great, and the party is doing this, and Ceausescu, the greatest,
and his wife is a genius,
ever,
right?
and so on and so forth.
And Ceausescu is a genius, right?
And the genius, and great chemist, and so on and so on. And then you have the reality of day to day, which is completely the opposite, right? So this sense of irreality is also what I think what made the communist elite not realize what was going on in the country. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why you had the collapse of Soviet Union, collapse of the communist countries in general, and in particular collapse of the Soviet Union.
Although the successor elite tended to be communists who realized how wrong the ethnic harmony was, right? So Slobodan Milosevic, he's a Yugoslavian Communist Party member who says, wait a second, the Serbs are the biggest group here. Like, if I just go and fall in on Serbia, then I can take over, I can be the new dictator, but so like in a different way, but still same basic idea. Right.
That's true.
Of course, in a lot of the ex-Soviet republics, you get a nationalist in who just says, hey, I got my finger on the pulse of these people. They want to hear that they are Kazakhs. So, yeah, Kazakhs.
Yes. Yeah. No, so you have this incredible change, which, once again, it shows that somehow this period of communism was just an extraordinary artificial period in the history of humanity. It's probably nothing like this ever happened.
Right. So you had a 9-month email exchange with Princeton president Christopher Eisgruber. Could you distill the essence of the exchange down to just one paragraph?
Yeah. So basically, he says, I believe in academic freedom and in free speech, but the same academic freedom and free speech applies to bureaucrats whenever they do what they have done, for example, to Joshua Katz. In other words, to present them as to lie about them, to present them as racist, and to really harass them, really, as it happened in the case of Joshua Katz again. Right. So it's this disconnect between, on one hand, he is for academic freedom, on the other hand, I don't think he, for whatever reasons, I don't think he really understands that, you know, academic freedom is the freedom of faculty members. Does not really apply to the bureaucracy or to the administration of the university. They cannot harass other people. So anyway, this.
Yeah, because as non-professors, what good are their opinions anyway? Is that the idea? Like, why should we take them seriously? Like they're functionaries. Is that your thinking or what?
Yes, right. But in any case, I mean, just to make it clear again. So basically, he pretends to be a strong advocate of free speech, yet believes that its protections apply really to his own administration when they exercise their power to shame or humiliate or ostracize individual members.
Wasn't another important part of the exchange just that he claimed there was going to be faculty input on the Katz case, and then it turned out that he ignored all of that?
Right, exactly. So there was a report by a faculty committee which was essentially taking. So I don't know if I should repeat the story. So it's a long story, but in any case, we made a complaint. The complaint was rejected by the university. Then it was reviewed by a faculty committee. The faculty committee came up with a report which was in our favor, completely in our favor, and then Eisgruber completely disregarded.
So it's not really true that Katz doesn't have a friend on the faculty. He's got a whole committee. And was it unanimously in favor of him, or what happened on that committee?
Yes, I think. I mean, it's not so much in. You see, when you talk about Katz, you talk about two things, right? You talk about the actual reason for which he was fired, which is different from the one that we took on, right? I'm not sure you are aware of this, right? There were two.
Oh, yeah, I know the whole story.
Yeah, so it's this faculty committee. So the report of the faculty committee I'm talking about is one that refers to the way he was portrayed in this freshman orientation. In the previous freshman orientation last year. So that's the one that we took on, and we complained, and Eisgruber disregarded the report of the faculty committee.
Right. So you just mentioned, you just said that Eisgruber doesn't understand academic freedom. So based on your interactions, where would you put Eisgruber on that fanatic opportunist continuum we talked about before, where let's say 1 is full fanatic, 0 is full opportunist? Where is he?
0.5.
0. So he's right in the middle.
Yes.
Okay, so
I think he's a very conflicted, and I do think that he's a conflicted individual. I mean, I think he believes, with half of his brain, he believes that academic freedom is very important. With the other half, he thinks that there are all these other things that have to do with social justice. That he has to square it somehow. He has to square the circle, and finds it difficult to do it. I mean,
there's squaring the circle where you intellectually believe two things, and there's squaring the circle where you intellectually believe one thing, but that will get you fired, and so you have to somehow say something else. So,
my feeling is that he believes both things, and of course he's also opportunistic. Obviously, I mean, I think he took into account somehow where the pressure was coming from. I mean, there is clearly more pressure coming from those who wanted to fire Katz than from those who wanted to keep Katz. So I presume that also played a very important role.
In a recent piece, you and co-authors advocate the following university reforms. A, sharply reduce the share of non-tenure track instructors. B, subject all mandatory attendance events to faculty review. C, inclusion of faculty members on all faculty misconduct committees. D, standard due process rights for recused faculty. E, faculty involvement in undergraduate admissions. F, follow the Chicago Principles of Academic Freedom and the Calvin Report's recommendations on political neutrality. Here's my question. Given the level of leftist fanaticism among tenure track faculty, how much of an improvement would these reforms actually be? Most notably, wouldn't the main effect of A just be to give tenure jobs to a massive new cohort of woke activists?
Yeah, actually, I agree with you. I don't think it was well these principles were not well formulated. I would put it more succinctly right now as being to restore freedom of speech, depoliticize the university, and restore the power of the faculty. This would be the real goals. Now, these other things that we put in the article are all useful, but somehow they should be.
So restore the power of the faculty. That will save STEM, but then that'll just leave the humanities and social sciences basically where they are, right? Because they're already taken over.
Correct. So,
but at least we'll have STEM, and STEM is what really delivers the great products of civilization. Is that the idea?
Well, yeah, and more. I would say that these are the goals that we have to strive and fight for. Can we implement them now? Probably not. But doing nothing is not an option. So, I mean, we have to really talk about what we want, even if, for example, we have no chance of implementing them right now anyway.
So on that subject of we can't do nothing, what if we could do everything? All right. So suppose Princeton's board of trustees came to you and they said, Sergiu Klainerman, you are great. We love every word you say. We'll do anything you tell us to do. Just tell us what we need to do to save Princeton. All right. So would you ramp up your suggested reforms, or so what would you tell them if the board of trustees came hat in hand and said, we are ready to do just what you say?
Okay, you'll be surprised by my answer. I would say, first of all, I will ask for more than what I asked.
More than all? They'll give you 100%.
Okay, fire the top. So here is what's more. Fire the top administration, dismantle DI, eliminate all politicized departments, the grievance studies, and reform the admission policy of the university. That will have to come first before any new permanent structures are put in place. So
Wow, it's almost like you read my mind, Sergiu, because my next question was going to say what I want to do. It almost sounds like we agree completely.
Right, exactly.
Yes, so my next question actually was, if it were me in this hypothetical, I'd start with mass firings of the administration, including obviously Ice Gruber, elimination of all DEI employees, elimination of grievance studies. And then the last one, we like you, maybe we agree. So I suggested admission strictly on standardized test scores. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think the only way right now to get out of the many problems that we have today with a system in place today is really to give up on any other considerations but standardized tests. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, like anyone who's paying attention has to admit standardized tests aren't perfect, but better than letting some extremely bigoted humans decide your true merit and then hand out submissions based on that.
It's true, but of course I have no idea how we can go from here to there.
Well, so you're mentioning Princeton is a private organization. If the board of trustees is listening, Sergiu and I are really happy to go and just tell you what to do.
Yeah, I'm afraid.
And like, here's the thing: in a regular business, there would be someone saying we would get sued into the ground if we tried doing this stuff. But Princeton is so fabulously rich. I think the answer to that is we'll just hire a lot more lawyers to defend ourselves from lawsuits, and we're going to do what we want to do.
Yeah,
that's really what the Ivy League is doing right now. With the affirmative action cases with the Supreme Court, they've just said, look, we care so much, we are going to just spend enough on lawyers to get our way, right? And if you can spend enough on lawyers to get your way on one thing, you could change it around and do the opposite with your lawyers working loyally to help you accomplish what you want to do lawfully.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's very hard to understand what they really want. I mean, in many of my articles, actually, I said if the university is serious about improving the situations of minorities, the way to do is to invest a huge amounts of money. They can invest it in local education, for example. I mean, I know they can go to Trenton and try to improve. I mean, they can put a few billion dollars in Trenton and improve the education there. That will have some effect, right? Or local. I mean, Princeton, of course. It's mainly it doesn't have this problem because it doesn't have that many minorities, but they can go to Toronto, they can go to New York. I mean, they have the money, and they claim all the time that they care about minorities. So why don't they do that? Instead, they are doing something which is wrong for everybody, including the minorities. Right? Because there are so many kids. We get so many kids in mathematics, for example. We get kids who are, say, Black Americans. They are very smart. They are willing to learn. They want to learn. They can't say they want to do mathematics. They go into the mathematics department, and they are surrounded by people who are about 5 years ahead in terms of preparation. So they get discouraged, they get depressed. Many of them really start resenting the university. I mean, there are many examples.
They'll probably just end up in a non-STEM department, right?
And right, or you can completely destroy the STEM department. But right now, what is happening is that these people are really deserved by the university in major ways, and the university doesn't care. They don't give a damn. They only look at the numbers. They want to have a certain numbers of minorities, and they don't care whether the minorities do well as a consequence or do badly. I don't think they give a damn about it. So most of these kids who would have done math or engineering or medicine or whatever, they end up in the end, they end up in gender studies or in disciplines where essentially they really restrain a lot the possibilities that they can have after they finish.
Right. Well, I'm so disappointed that during my years at Princeton, I had no idea that you were over in the math department, Sergiu. I walked by your building so many times, but I was just over in the economics department at Fisher Hall.
When was this?
I was there from 93 to 97, so we did overlap, actually.
Yes. I came in 87. So.
Yes. All right, last question. I see that we are both fans of George Orwell. Could you end with a favorite scene from Orwell that illuminates where we are and where we need to go?
Okay, so that's I must say I can't really talk about a particular segment of a book. I'd rather talk about the book itself. So I read Animal Farm in French, in fact, because obviously it was not available in Romanian when I was maybe 15 or 16. I don't exactly remember, but I still remember the extraordinary impact it had on me, given my communist education before that. There's never been a better, more concise analysis of the communist experience, I think, than the Animal Farm. 1984 went deeper, but still the Animal Farm remains my favorite. After reading that book, I don't see how any rational person can still hold the belief that communism was good, only badly implemented. Because the whole story is about how well-intentions led to a completely disastrous outcome. Every time it was tried, obviously, this experience led to total disasters.
All right. Well, why don't we end it on that? Thank you so much for your time, Sergiu. Thank you for fighting the good fight at Princeton. And hopefully one day I will get to meet you in person and we can have some PJ's pancakes or Thomas Sweet's ice cream together.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I hope you come.
All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I'll give you the last word. Anything else you want to say?
Yes, actually, I have a quotation from Orwell, which I think it's
right. Let's hear it.
It's very relevant. So he said somewhere, I don't remember where, he said the essence of being human is that one does not seek perfection, that one is sometimes willing to commit sins for the sake of loyalty, that one does not push ascetics to the point where it makes friendly intercourse impossible, and that one is prepared in the end to be defeated and broken up by life, which is the inevitable price of fastening one's love upon other human individuals. So this doesn't square with everything we talked about, but I think it's square with the way
the
experience of Joshua Katz at Princeton.
All right. Okay, so thank you and happy Halloween.
We get so many kids in mathematics, for example. We get kids who are, say, Black Americans. They are very smart. They are willing to learn. They want to learn. They can't say they want to do mathematics. They go into the mathematics department, and they are surrounded by people who are about 5 years ahead in terms of preparation. So they get discouraged, they get depressed. Many of them really start resenting the university. I mean, there are many examples.
They'll probably just end up in a non-STEM department, right?
And right, or you can completely destroy the STEM department. But right now, what is happening is that these people are really deserved by the university in major ways, and the university doesn't care. They don't give a damn. They only look at the numbers. They want to have a certain numbers of minorities, and they don't care whether the minorities do well as a consequence or do badly. I don't think they give a damn about it. So most of these kids who would have done math or engineering or medicine or whatever, they end up in the end, they end up in gender studies or in disciplines where essentially they really restrain a lot the possibilities that they can have after they finish.
Right. Well, I'm so disappointed that during my years at Princeton, I had no idea that you were over in the math department, Sergiu. I walked by your building so many times, but I was just over in the economics department at Fisher Hall.
When was this?
I was there from 93 to 97, so we did overlap, actually.
Yes. I came in 87. So.
Yes. All right, last question. I see that we are both fans of George Orwell. Could you end with a favorite scene from Orwell that illuminates where we are and where we need to go?
Okay, so that's, I must say, I can't really talk about a particular, segment of a book. I'd rather talk about the book itself. So I read Animal Farm in French, in fact, because obviously it was not available in Romanian when I was maybe 15 or 16. I don't exactly remember, but I still remember the extraordinary impact it had on me, given my communist education before that. There's never been a better, more concise analysis of the communist experience, I think, than the Animal Farm. 1984 went deeper, but still the Animal Farm remains my favorite. After reading that book, I don't see how any rational person can still hold the belief that communism was good, only badly implemented. Because the whole story is about how well-intentions led to a completely disastrous outcome. Every time it was tried, obviously, this experience led to total disasters.
All right. Well, why don't we end it on that? Thank you so much for your time, Sergiu. Thank you for fighting the good fight at Princeton. And hopefully one day I will get to meet you in person and we can have some PJ's pancakes or Thomas Sweet's ice cream together.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I hope you come.
All right. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I'll give you the last word. Anything else you want to say?
Yes, actually, I have a quotation from Orwell, which I think it's
right. Let's hear it.
It's very relevant. So he said somewhere, I don't remember where, he said the essence of being human is that one does not seek perfection, that one is sometimes willing to commit sins for the sake of loyalty, that one does not push ascetics to the point where it makes friendly intercourse impossible, and that one is prepared in the end to be defeated and broken up by life, which is the inevitable price of fastening one's love upon other human individuals. So this doesn't square with everything we talked about, but I think it's square with the way
yeah, I guess
the experience of Joshua Katz at Princeton.
All right. Okay, so thank you and happy Halloween.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Okay.
You have kids?
Oh yeah, only four.
Only four. Okay.
Okay. All right. Good night. Thanks again.
Good night.